And that's the end, plus the final exam.
So we're meeting on Monday for
Yep.
class session?
Any of your classes that meet on Monday, meet. So, classes go through Monday.
Dr. Reed, that guy, second column from the left, middle.
Yep.
To the left. Yeah. What's his name?
George Pataki. He was the governor of New York.
Okay. Who was the guy from Ohio that was like
John
until the
Kasich?
very end? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see him on in that montage.
Mm-hmm.
He did stay in the race a little longer. He was governor of Ohio, he was a former congressman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's not in there. In that list. So, and he sort of certainly fell out of favor in lots of ways afterward. But yeah, there was a bunch of different governors. Huckabee, the one in the middle is Perry, who was governor of Texas, governor of Louisiana down here, New Jersey, Florida. This is was the governor of Wisconsin. I thought he would have a real good chance, but he didn't even make it through the first set of primaries. Maybe not even up to the first debate. He kind of fizzled out there. Okay, so let's have prayer. We're going to jump into where we left off with the nominations being secure. Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump as the nominees going into the 2016 election. So let's have prayer, and then remember, Monday we still have class. So let's pray. Father, we do pray that your Spirit will be here and help us and be with us and guide us in our understanding of this class and what is going on in it. And we pray that you will have your hand to accomplish your will. And we pray that you will strengthen us and give us your hand in understanding this material and all of the different things that come on during this period. And so we pray that your grace will be with us and help us as we serve you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so we're almost at the end. Now, one of the things that we've come into consideration is that the introduction of Donald Trump really changed the political landscape and what was expected. Most people thought that Donald Trump would have no hope. Now, his announcement was without a doubt unorthodox, which was done at his at Trump Tower in New York, and it was supposed they had written him prepared remarks that would go on about 5 minutes, and it took him about 45 minutes to present those remarks. And he went off script into other things like Mexicans are coming here and they're rapists and who knows what else. And so it just was, and most people thought his campaign was finished right then and there, that he had committed, touched the electric rail in of politics. And so most people wrote him off. Almost everyone, whether they were a politician, a news person, a pundit, and if you weren't a real conservative, even they pretty much wrote him off. But definitely the liberals did. That they said there was no way that Donald Trump could be president. And one of the things that I think that propelled Donald Trump was what I said right at the end of the last class, is that he had a way of presenting himself, even if he's a billionaire, where the average person saw him as someone who thought like they did about average things. And one of the reasons is because he was not, even though his father was a businessman, and there's this theory that he gave him a couple $1 million to begin his company, that is seed money if you're have $10 billion today. And he built an empire of real estate and other businesses, but was never really accepted by the elitists in New York, Manhattan, because he was born in Queens. So he's sort of an outsider to that world. And so when he went in there and he built Trump Tower and did these other things, he was always looked at as an outsider by them. And politicians liked him because of his money, but they never expected that he might think he was their equal, who could become one of them. He was only supposed to fund their efforts. So in that sense, he had this mentality of a working class person. He called John McCain, he said that John McCain was not a war hero just because of getting captured. In fact, he prefers people who don't get captured. Now, that was ridiculed, but in the previous election, when John McCain was running as the nominee, he was criticized by President Carter for the very thing, and Democrats thought that was fine, as though his only claim to fame was that he got shot down over North Vietnam, and that, you know, maybe if he was a better pilot, he wouldn't have. So that shows that, I mean, that's an idea that was out there, but he was willing to say it in a way at a Republican event where it seemed it was anti-military. But the pollsters were just aghast. How can you say this? And they would say these things, and his poll numbers would go up. He did other things. He attacked Rosie O'Donnell and suggested that, like he was accused by the Fox News anchor Meghan McCain of saying all kinds of awful things about women, and she quoted some things that he had said about them, and then he said that he only ever said those things about Rosie O'Donnell. Yeah, so that wasn't a denial. It was like, yeah, I do say that, but only about this one person. And everyone might laugh and think that, you know, I don't know, that was warranted. I'm sure it wasn't. But nonetheless, that kind of thing, most people just didn't do that. He would criticize his opponents, call them names, and say things to get noticed. And the news media thought he was a clown. That's why they put him on the news. They thought he was looked at as ridiculous by the American people as they thought he was. That didn't work out that way. Then at the Republican National Convention, oh, another thing is Twitter. He talked directly to the American people with Twitter in an unfiltered medium, not going through the media. Earlier, people like Roosevelt would use radio, Reagan television with the same type of effect. Now, you have to necessarily work with the media to get on television. So now it was social media, Twitter. And because Twitter had a hands-off policy, you can say and do as you please, they allowed him to do whatever he wanted. And in the first election, it was believed that some of the policies of Facebook and Twitter helped elect Donald Trump. And that's why these companies are now under such determination to avoid that mistake again and eliminate ideas from the public sphere that liberals would not want to be heard. So the attack on the cons, those two women, man and woman, they're a married couple, their son was a serviceman, a Muslim, who died in Iraq. And they suggested that Donald Trump would not have wanted their son in America because of the idea of bans on Muslims entering the United States. And he held up his copy of the Constitution and suggested that Donald Trump should read it. And if he doesn't have one, he would give him his. And that the Constitution says that everyone is equal. Now, the Constitution doesn't require the president to let every person in the United States that wants to come. In fact, the Congress had given the president the right to limit immigration for whatever reason they wish in a law that was passed back in the 50s. But Donald Trump, one of his biggest problems is and this is what happened on January 6th, he doesn't know when he's gone too far. I mean, he knows, he trusts his instincts, and 9 times out of 10, he's right. but when he's wrong, he's too far into it before he knows he's wrong, and he won't listen to anybody. And that happened this night. After they criticized him, he went on Twitter and lit up Twitter into the night, criticizing them, saying that he felt sorry for her because Mrs. Khan couldn't say anything. I mean, all kinds of things. And it was looked at as an attack on a Gold Star family whose son was killed in the war. Well, Donald Trump probably had no clue what that even meant if someone was telling him, don't say that, it's a Gold Star family. He's clueless about such things because he don't care. They attacked him, he's going to attack back. He don't care who they are. That was a flack that where he first started to lose traction. Then the big thing was here. I remember this night because it was in October, an October surprise right before the election. My wife and I were up at Indiana Wesleyan University for Alumni Day for her class reunion, and we were there at the hotel and we were watching this fallout on Friday night and then going into Saturday. There was an Access Hollywood. There was a tape that was made of Donald Trump and this person here. Is it Billy Bush? Anyway, one of the Bush is some relation to the Bush family, were being interviewed, in which it was tape that was never supposed to be put on the air, but they were joking around and he was making some comments as though he's like that it's good to be a celebrity because then you can abuse women and use some graphic language and get away with it. And around that time was when he was starting to date Melania, and there seems to be something very significant. Donald Trump isn't exactly a choir boy. You know, he's lived a pretty raucous life up until he married Melania. She kind of cleaned him up. It was either that, even though his introduction into their relationship wouldn't be exactly follow KMBC dating guidelines. but
Not all the ones on campus follow those guidelines either, so it doesn't matter.
yeah, well, that is probably true. But nonetheless, this doesn't work. He's not. She's pretty much cleaned him up. I think he's been pretty straight since then, marrying her. But nonetheless, this broke in the news, and I believe it was thought this would sink him. Everyone thought it would sink him, and it nearly did. They were coming up to the one debate. There was some talk about that. The first debate in which he was pretty good against Hillary Clinton, but he had no preparation. And as a result, when she brought up the fact that he called Miss Universe Miss Piggy, that kind of threw him for a loop. Miss Argentina.
Was her sweater unraveling?
Not necessarily, but I will say. No, I hope not. Who knows what was going on behind the scenes? But you know that Donald Trump owns the Miss Universe, Miss USA pageants. He's the corporate owner of those organizations, and so Miss Universe, Miss USA, and those women that run or represent that company are his employees. And he certainly could be quoted as saying things that were not too attractive to this woman who was gaining weight during the year that she was Miss Universe, and as a result, he thought she might not be that she should be replaced. But anyway, they talked about that, they brought those things up, and in the end, he had to go on, make a special video announcement of apology, which for him was a real sense of apology. And then he went down on the streets of New York and he was just mobbed by fans. In the end, Hillary Clinton's issues with emails will eventually change the day, because what happened was this event did rock a bunch of his support, but when women came out to defend him, and it did not really shake his real rock level support, and it didn't blow over, but it just sort of came to nothing. He did three things that really helped his campaign. The very night that this broke, at that debate, he brought out the accusers of Bill Clinton for a press conference to suggest that nothing had ever happened, and that although he may have talked about it, the husband of the nominee has abused women more than once and never held accountable for it. And these women were there to have a press conference. And he brought that up during the debate. And I will imagine that Bill Clinton, he looked rather sick, knowing that those accusers were in the crowd at the debate as the guests of the Republican candidate, and were being recognized by him. And they had a press conference just before. Then there was the issue of the emails, and just a week before the election, the FBI reopened that investigation. What they were trying to do was to open it and close it before the election in order to discredit any chance of this becoming an issue during the Clinton presidency. But in actuality, doing that before the election cost her votes enough to lose in several key states. So that was a mistake. Now, in the end, here is the general election. Donald Trump is the nominee. Here's Hillary Clinton posting, she may have borrowed that from Benny Hinn. Outfit. For where she came to the one debate. And I have spent many hours on YouTube rewatching the election coverage.
Those were great.
Because at the beginning of the night, they were just sitting there, just ready to, they couldn't contain themselves. It's only a few hours until we have our first woman president. And then the first results started coming in. And,
Amen.
and Kentucky, it goes for Trump, and so forth. And then it just started whittling away. Trump has to run the board on all of the states that might fall his way. And then they started falling, one right after another, right in line. It just was unbelievable.
Mr. Dr. E. What was one of those key states? I can't remember. Was Pennsylvania one of those?
Well, Pennsylvania was definitely, I'll tell you, I was up that night ironing shirts till 2 o'clock in the morning, watching the results come in, both on Fox News, online, and on CBS, which is the only channel I can get here. But both of them were not saying anything. They hadn't said anything for a long time. They were out looking for votes. The whole problem, if there was cheating in the 2020 election, it was done in such a way as to overcome the apparent need to cheat, to overcome the Trump surge. What I think happened here is they weren't prepared for the level of support Trump was getting. And as a result, they were tying up the vote in order to look for votes, find ways of creating more votes. And they couldn't do it. And so election results were delayed. Wisconsin was the huge one, because Wisconsin hadn't gone Republican since 1988. 88, when Reagan ran for re-election. And when Wisconsin went Republican, Hillary had not even visited Wisconsin at all during the campaign. And then Pennsylvania, Michigan, And were other big states, Florida, North Carolina, and such. But that was what was called the blue wall that was expected to hold and maintain the election. Here's the
finally here.
Going into this night, where do we stand?
This is where we stood coming into the night. 268 to 204, so clearly an advantage for Secretary Clinton.
Take a look here. If Donald Trump wins tonight, no matter who they voted for, take a look at these numbers here. 21% say they'll be concerned. 37% say they'll be scared.
This is what both candidates want. They want to be living there starting January 20th of next year. Florida has been going back and forth,
Yeah,
just changed again. It's only 11,000 vote lead. Just now it changed.
Math on your feet, I like this.
The Empire State Building in New York City. Take a look at our running tally. The electoral vote for Anderson this night is turning out to be a real nail biter.
All along, the Trump campaign has been saying that Florida's a must-win for them. And I mean,
They can't win without it. Donald Trump.
yes, they could. They could have won without winning any one of the states they won, even Texas.
I can see
With
their
such a
fingers
big
probably
majority.
bleeding. Yeah, fingers probably bleeding because there's no more nail to bite.
I wouldn't call anything encouraging for Hillary Clinton at the moment, to be honest with you, my friend.
Wolf, the scene here is so different than it was a few hours ago when people.
I mean, they had no entertainment at the Javits Center. And all they could do was watch these returns come in because they hadn't anticipated, they thought by 9 o'clock it would be over, that Trump would concede and that they would be there partying all night and celebrating. So after 9 o'clock, they didn't have anything to do but just watch the returns come in little by little, still showing how Hillary was behind. And then Mrs. Clinton would not concede until Barack Obama called her and said, it's time to concede. It's time for you to call Hillary Clinton and call Trump and concede the race. But she wasn't prepared to do that even then.
Being relaxed, I've been looking around the room at people who are stone-faced. Some of them have been crying.
This was a white lash against a changing country. It was a white lash against a black president.
This is the people rising up saying it's time to listen to us. It's time to listen to us in Michigan and Wisconsin and work for the people.
Hillary Clinton has called Donald Trump to concede the race.
Now, so Hillary lost, Donald Trump wins. He will be inaugurated. And there was controversy all the way through as it comes to the Electoral College. This had the largest this electoral vote had the largest number of faithless electors voting for people not approved by the state in which they elected. Even though more Hillary voters were disloyal than Trump's, there were a significant number, including the first American Indian, an activist from Washington called Spotted Eagle, received the first electoral vote as a Native American. This was the first president to be elected without prior political or military experience, and probably the least political experience of any person since Washington. And many thought, this was not a good thing, that it was a terrible idea. He's from New York, the first major election victory of a resident of a northeastern state. I'm not sure when you would have to go back to seeing the last one. Probably Franklin Roosevelt would have been the last one elected that was from a northeast state. No living president voted for him, but from either party. The Bushes voted for, at least Bush 41 voted for Hillary Clinton. Bush 43, I'm not sure who he voted for. I think he might have voted for no one, just left that part of the ballot blank. But that was a big change. He comes into the presidency without any support from the political establishment. That was just fine with him. He promised to change the way America worked. And in his inaugural address, he lambasted and criticized all of the political establishment people who were sitting behind him. That may not have been the smartest thing to do. Not every person was excited with Donald Trump being elected.
The office of President of the United States, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend. The Constitution of the United States. So help me God. Congratulations, Mr.
She had trouble accepting it.
Is that Joe?
Sleepy Joe.
Oh. I love how she kind of like looked up at the camera to make sure it was still filming
That's
her.
what I was thinking.
She's just like,
So, now, he is, now, Trump as a president, the deep state will fight back against him. And there really is such a thing, regardless if people want to believe it. Trump's campaign, he claimed, was spied on, and now we know Bill Barr would say that there was no question but that was true. That there's, they would not want to necessarily use that phrase, but the FBI planted informants in the campaign to look for malfeasance they hoped was there. Now, I'll tell you what, Donald Trump is not a perfect man, but he probably is close to being perfect, because as much as they've tried to find dirt on him, they haven't been able to find anything that has really stuck. And now, with him being indicted and this rape trial, they're going into state courts in New York where he has no hope of winning, because everyone is prejudiced against him, and they will find him guilty. His only hope is to have these rulings tossed out by the Supreme Court, if he is able to appeal them there. Robert Mueller was appointed to investigate Russian interference in the 2016 election and found no Russia-Trump collusion. Even so, there will eventually be fallout from that will lead to an impeachment with dealing with a phone call over his conduct with the Ukrainians, in doing things that every president has the discretion to do. It's just that there was a tie-in to the Biden administration or Biden family within that whole fiasco in Ukraine. And they said that he was trying to get dirt on his potential political rival, which I'm not sure what is going on with the whole Mar-a-Lago raid and all of that. If that's not trying with the Biden administration to get dirt on a potential political enemy or rival. So it's very intriguing. Trump is the first former president since term limits have been enacted that really has a chance at being elected to 2 non-consecutive terms. President Ford wanted that possibility, so did Carter, but really there was no hope for them, per se. But this really could happen. Obamacare repeal failed, partly because, and there's a picture of it, when John McCain, who was still mad at being called not a war hero, voted no to block this measure, even though he had just been reelected to the Senate on a campaign pledge to overturn Obamacare, but it was his vote that sank it. Then you have tax reform, which Mitch McConnell helped to push through, and that was a significant tax rebate system. And then energy, he reestablished our commitment to fossil fuels, coal, oil, drilling for oil everywhere. You can see this day when McCain is voting no was not Mitch McConnell's favorite day. Now, it won't be long until Senator McCain will die of brain cancer after that. And right now, I don't think there are any Republican senators in Arizona. It's been transformed out there politically. But his domestic policies were centered on energy, taxes, and he did get some things done with Obamacare, but not the full repeal of the law, which he had hoped to do. And most people were not aware. Like he would say, my first day I will repeal this. Well, you can't do that. Congress has to do that. But he did work hard at it. Now, Trump in the courts. He broke records in appointing circuit court judges, and he did things that no president has ever done before, at least not in the modern era. He would appoint the judges for the areas he thought were best without any regard to what the local senators or representatives thought on the matter. And every president before this would take recommendations from the senators from a particular state, even if they were liberal from California or something like that. And that meant that you could almost predict that the courts in liberal areas would stay liberal and the courts in conservative areas would stay conservative. And what he did was appoint conservatives everywhere, constitutional judges all around, and has really transformed the courts in the latest year. Now, his first two nominees first was Neil Gorsuch, which we can thank Mitch McConnell for. Mitch McConnell held up the nomination of Merrick Garland on the basis that a president who was retiring, like Obama in his last year, did not have the right to appoint a Supreme Court justice. Now, that was standing tradition at the time. But he held it up. He would not allow his nomination to come to a vote. And Senate is not really obligated to vote on anything. So after Trump won, he would nominate Neil Gorsuch. And then that was passed. But eventually that would destroy what became known as the filibuster of Supreme Court justices. So then it became all you needed was 51 votes in the Senate. And the Republicans, I think, had 53 votes, something like that. So you had a small margin of error in dealing with this. Next was Brett Kavanaugh, which was for all the money. This would put a conservative majority on the court when Senator Kennedy stepped down, who was always, you could never tell if he was going to vote this way or that way. So Brett Kavanaugh was known as being a conservative. And that's the man who was accused of all of the drunken partying, and sexual harassment, and so forth, in order to get him derailed. And also his issue on abortion. In the end, he did pass by one vote. And I think Senator Manchin of West Virginia, the Democrat, voted for him too. So he then was sworn into office, and that was a fiasco. People were like ready to declare him guilty, and if you supported him, you were pro-rape and pro-sexual assault and so forth, when there really was no evidence for it. And even if there was, it's trying to hold someone accountable for things they do in high school after football parties and so forth. And We may not necessarily be involved in such things, but you know, there's a lot of drinking in college. A lot of drinking goes on, and a lot of carousing, and a lot of all kinds of horrible things that 50 years later, 25 years later, you don't want your entire career based on decisions you made when you were an adolescent. That's why juvenile court records are sealed when a person becomes an adult. No problem here, though. They will be glad to dig that up and make it into a terrible thing. Then the liberals' minds went exploded again. Not long before the inauguration, it may have even been after the election, but it was very close to that. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the 85-year-old icon of liberal politics, dies of cancer. And she had cancer multiple times. And she was holding out, trying to live through the Trump years so that someone else elected as a Democrat would replace her. And she just didn't, they couldn't keep her on life support anymore or whatever, and she dies. And they released a statement that it was her dying wish that the president would wait to appoint, would not appoint her, that they would go through a period of mourning. Everyone who was like, if you're so excited that she died, I'm not excited she died, but I was glad to have an opportunity to appoint a successor. This gave a 6-3 conservative majority on the court if you could get a replacement. And since the Republicans controlled the Senate, they went ahead with the nomination, even though 4 years before, Mitch McConnell said, no way, Jose, or no way, Obama. No way are we going to have this elected. We're not going to allow a president in his last year to nominate someone. He said that only applies when the party in power in the White House is different than the party in the Senate. That's only when that rule applies. So when we have a president and a Senate, we're going to go with it. So that's what they did. And so September, she dies in September, so it was before the election. And Amy Coney Barrett was thought to be conservative. She was a Catholic. The doctrine of the Catholic Church lives in her being, which meant she was a radical on abortion. And she probably is. She also was a homeschool mom, which was thought to be, that was wrong. Red flags everywhere. And she was a graduate not of Harvard or Yale or some other, she graduated from Notre Dame Law School. So she definitely doesn't fit the mold of any of the other people on the Supreme Court. So that, she was eventually elected confirmed by the Senate and was placed on the court. That was a significant move by President Trump. This is probably his greatest legacy, these three people on the Supreme Court. That's what we elected him to do, and Mitch McConnell saw to it that it happened. And I'm not a big fan of Mitch McConnell, but he really came through here. Now, foreign policy. He withdrew the United States from the job-killing Paris Climate Accord. He withdrew us from the horrible one-sided Iran deal. He moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Every president since Nixon has promised to do this. He did it. And when he did, they all went berserk like it was something horrible that he would do. Now, Jerusalem is the official capital of Israel, but we've always maintained that our embassy was in Tel Aviv because that was the capital of Israel before the Six-Day War. And we never moved it to Jerusalem. My mom, when she was in Jerusalem, was there at the U.S. Embassy there in Jerusalem. He protecting Americans from terrorists with travel bans that were upheld by the Supreme Court. He issued executive order to keep Guantanamo Bay open, which had never been closed during the 8 years of Obama, even though he had ordered it closed. Concluded an historic U.S. Mexico trade deal to replace NAFTA, and negotiations with Canada, as I wrote this, are underway. But that was eventually added too. So there's a new trade deal for North America. Reached a breakthrough agreement with the EU to increase U.S. exports, imposed tariffs on foreign steel and aluminum to protect our national security. That was a change in tradition. We had become a nation that was afraid to impose tariffs because we were pro-free trade. But when other nations, he would say, are cheating us, we need to fight back. Imposed tariffs on China in response to China's forced technology transfer, intellectual property theft, and a chronically abusive trade practices. Net exports are on track to increase by $59 billion by the end of the year 2019. Improved vetting and screening for refugees and switched focus to overseas resettlement. He also was seen as having a good relationship with the Chinese, and after this was all written, he was able to open up negotiations with North Korea, was the first president to go there, and there were no major North Korean attempts at violent displays during his presidency, because I know they knew that if he did, there would have been consequences. He also promised to build them resorts in Pyongyang, like Trump resorts, and make them billions of dollars if they would just open up. The American people would flood there because North Korea is beautiful if you could just get resources to it. People who go there on vacation have a timeshare in North Korea. Trump Tower, yeah, Trump Pyongyang. So, 2018 midterms. Democrats retake the House. And it is not uncommon for the party in power to gain, the party in power to lose seats in midterm elections. The most women in the history of American elections were elected to Congress, both Republican and Democratic women, spending most of their time investigating President Trump. This developed into the first Trump impeachment for obstructing the investigation into his phone, impeached for obstructing the investigation into his phone call with Ukrainian president. This was a charge that was designed to deal with things as it relates to him being a trying to withhold resources from Ukraine, and that would be seen as a bribe or an attempt in order to get information from them on issues regarding the Bidens and Hunter Biden and so forth. And there's some evidence, there's very good evidence that the Biden family has had some difficult issues with the in Ukraine. Here are the individuals: Jerry Nadler, Schiff, and a few others. Val Deming, who should be vice president. They were some of the political, what you would call House managers who are selected to prosecute the case in the Senate once it goes to trial. There was very little hope of getting 2/3 of the Senate together to impeach Donald Trump. But eventually they were able to, he was acquitted, but it was set up in such a way that very few people really were understanding what was going on. So that did occur. And while this was happening, President Trump was dealing with the impeachment there in January of 2020. And COVID-19 was coming.
Good times.
Dr. Fauci became the most powerful man in the world. Whatever he said, people listened. Whether you wear masks, don't wear masks, wear 3 masks, don't go outside, whatever the case may be. And he was the highest paid American employee in the government, even more than the president, for his service at the National Institutes of Health because he had been there for so long. The economy locked down to flatten the curve, but really to try and destroy Donald Trump because they flattened the curve. And I can remember our governor going on about trying to be more like St. Louis and not as much like Philadelphia because of the way the pandemic happened back during the flu in, was it 1918 or whenever that was? And in Philadelphia, they had the Thanksgiving Day parade anyway, and they killed half the people who were out shopping. And we don't want to do that in Lexington. We want to be like St. Louis, where they lock everything down and everything's fine. Well, it turned out that this was a much different kind of disease. And they kept things locked down and eventually tried to pin the results of things on Donald Trump. Now, I want to